I got my own brother kicked out of the family for something he didn't do, and I'd do it again. My phone rang at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Mom's voice was shaking so bad I could barely understand her. Someone stole our retirement fund. Every penny. $200,000 gone. I threw on whatever clothes I could find and drove straight to their house. When I got there, the living room looked like a courtroom. My brother sat in the corner with his head down, not looking at anyone. My uncle was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, his face red and his hands moving while he talked. Mom sat next to Dad on the love seat, dabbing at her eyes with tissue. Everyone else stood around like they were waiting for someone to tell them what to do next. It had to be someone with access to the account, my uncle said, stopping to point at my brother. And we all know he's been struggling with money. The room got quiet in that way where everyone's thinking the same thing, but nobody wants to say it out loud. My brother finally lifted his head. His eyes met mine, and I could see how scared he was. He'd made some bad choices in his 20s, got into some debt, had to borrow money from our parents more than once, but that was years ago. He had a steady job now in his own apartment. I didn't take anything, he said, and his voice cracked. You have to believe me. Nobody responded. Mom wouldn't even look at him. My uncle crossed his arms and shook his head like he'd already made up his mind. The silence in that room was heavier than anything I'd felt in a long time. How much are we talking about? I asked. Everything, Mom said quietly. The retirement account, the savings, even the emergency fund. Over $200,000. All of it moved out over the past 3 months. 3 months. That meant someone had been doing this slowly, carefully. Someone who knew how to avoid getting caught too fast. That didn't sound like my brother at all. If he was desperate enough to steal, he would have grabbed everything at once and dealt with the problems later. This felt different. This felt planned. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. I'd been added to the family accounts years ago as a backup. I scrolled through the transfer records, looking at each one carefully. The amounts were different every time, but they all came from the same place. The device ID was listed right there in the security log. The transfers all came from the family computer. I said out loud. The one in Uncle's office at the family business. For just a second, something changed in my uncle's face. A small flicker behind his eyes before he got control of himself again. That computer's been there for 10 years, he said quickly. Anyone in the family could have used it. I kept looking at the records. The device ID tied everything back to that office. The office that my uncle kept locked. The computer that sat 10 feet from his desk. I didn't say anything else right then, but I made a mental note of how fast he was to point fingers at my brother. The next few days, I spent most of my time on the phone trying to get someone in my family to listen to me, but my uncle had already called everyone first. He told them I'd probably try to make up stories to protect my brother. Every conversation ended with someone telling me to let it go and stop making things worse. Then I found something. The timestamps had been altered. I could see it in the metadata. Someone had gone into the records and changed the times to make it look like the transfers happened when my brother was visiting our parents. But the original times were during business hours when my brother would have been at work across town. Someone had deliberately made my brother look guilty by changing the evidence after the fact. I made copies of everything and waited for the anniversary dinner on Saturday. The whole family would be there, including my uncle, confident and untouchable. I had a plan. When everyone was seated at the table, eating and laughing like nothing was wrong, I stood up. I have something to share about the missing money. My uncle's smile didn't waver. Let's not ruin this evening with conspiracy theories, please. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the table. I showed everyone the real bank records, the offshore account with my uncle's name on it, the altered timestamps side by side with the originals, his digital signature on every single transfer. The room went completely silent. Mom leaned forward, staring at the screen. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. That's your account number, she said slowly. I recognize it from when you helped us set up the business. My uncle's face went through 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Then my cousin stood up from across the table. I was with him when he found these files, he said, looking straight at my uncle. On your computer, in your office, during Friday's board meeting. The room exploded. Everyone talking at once, demanding answers. My uncle tried to explain, his voice getting louder. I built that business. I gave everything to this family. I wasn't going to let it go to waste on your retirement. He would have survived prison. He's young, but if people found out about the account, the business would collapse. Everyone would lose everything. Mom stepped forward, her voice shaking. You stole from us, and you were going to let our son go to prison for something you did. The words hung in the air. My uncle looked around the room, searching for someone who might still be on his side, but every face had closed against him. Dad walked to the door and opened it, letting in a rush of cold evening air. He pointed outside and said 5 words that ended everything. Get out and don't come back.